Thank you, Lasca and Corla. And I note the presence of Minister Fleming, but I'm sure that my sentiments and my contribution here will be passed on to Minister McConalogue, and that he will be notified of what I have to say here. So today I'm raising the issue of Keelbeg Pier in Union Hall. I suppose at the outset, just need to put it in context. We had a very welcome news a number of weeks ago in relation to €33 million of Brexit adjustment fund for local authorities to carry out works on smaller piers and harbours which were in charge of local authorities. This is very much welcome, and I think many of us in this House have been saying for quite a while that it is incredibly important that we invest in those small piers and harbours, and we open up access to our coastline for activities such as inshore fishing, marine leisure, whale watching, kayaking, sailing, rowing, you name it. There's huge potential there. So this type of funding is very much welcome. And in relation to the local authority, Cork County Council funding, Cork County Council did quite well. 14 of the 15 projects were awarded funding. So much needed works at places like Courtmacsherry, where they're going to dredge under a pontoon there so that they can actually realign the pontoon. Works at Turkhead, works at Lartana Valley, works at Connemore, Glengariff, Ardgroom, Kinsale, where they're replacing an entire pontoon, known as the Fisherman's Pontoon, which is all very, very welcome. Funnily enough, the one project that didn't succeed, as I said, there was 14 out of 15. The one project that didn't was Keelbeg Pier in Union Hall. And funnier again, I guess, is that in many ways it's a blessing that funding wasn't granted for the works at Keelbeg Pier, and I'll explain why. Because it was Cork County Council's intention to cut off access and use that funding to install a barrier on what we call the old pier in Keelbeg. It's the eastern pier. You have the commercial pier at Keelbeg, which is a fantastic new facility used by quite a significant fishing fleet for fishing activity. And then you have the old pier, which is, and at this point I must say that the commercial pier is completely cut off from public access, and the only part of that pier now that still has public access is this old pier, the eastern pier. But it was Cork County Council's intention, if they were successful in getting funding, to cut off that access. Now this pier is very important for some smaller inshore fishermen who use the pier. It's important for some leisure activities. The rowing club use this pier. The sailing club, the sailing school, which is located in another pier in Glandore, but they use it to launch their boats. So this piece of infrastructure is absolutely vital. Now, where Cork County Council are coming from on this is the fact that the end of this pier, the last half of this pier, is in disrepair. Some of the pier is being chipped off. It is in quite bad condition. My question here today, Minister, and for Minister McConalogue as well, is that Cork County Council, if they reapply for repair works, for repair of the pier, for installation of infrastructure such as rails, ladders, cleats for tying off boats, that application will be looked on. It wouldn't require a foreshore licence, which I understand is the difficulty with this scheme. But my ask is that, I suppose, in conjunction with the department, that they would liaise with Cork County Council and encourage an application for repair of that pier rather than a barrier to cut off much needed access for pier users there. Thank you, Minister.
I want to thank Deputy Sullivan for raising this issue, and I'm representing the Minister for Agriculture, Minister McConalogue, here today, and who's asked me to respond on his behalf, and I will speak directly with the Minister during the course of the day to reinforce the points that you were making here. So the responsibility for the development and maintenance of local authority-owned piers, harbours and slipways rests with each local authority in the first sense. Keelbeg Harbour is owned by Cork County Council. I'm also mindful that the primary governance role for local authorities rests with with the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and any issues concerning the administration or function of local authorities should be addressed to the Minister. So there's two ministers involved in this because it is the local authority are actually the owners of the project. I'm aware that there are concerns from harbour users concerning the future of Keelbeg Harbour. Earlier this year, the Minister announced a Brexit adjustment local authority marine infrastructure scheme, Bellamy scheme 2022-2023. This scheme was designed having regard to the recommendations of the Seafood Sector Task Force, who were tasked with assessing how we could help the seafood sector adjust to the impact of Brexit. The report of the Seafood Task Force proposed that €80 million 5-year initiative for the development of publicly owned marine infrastructure, of which the earlier years would focus on small-scale, shovel-ready local authority projects be funded under the Brexit Adjustment Scheme. And the resulting infrastructure development is intended to provide a longer-term platform for the development of new and diversified economic activity in the coastal community. An integrated application at a local level was envisaged by the task force to help the seafood sector pivot towards locally led development and marine tourism initiatives. At the Skipper Expo in March, the Minister announced the Brexit Blue Economy Enterprise Development Scheme, which had a €25 million budget for the years 22 to 23, also funded under the EU Brexit Adjustment Reserve, in keeping with the Task Force recommendation. So I hope the Deputy in the House can appreciate that the Minister is fully committed to seeing through the Task Force report insofar as he can. Our seafood sector in Cork and elsewhere needs this to be delivered. On the 25th of April, the Minister announced the allocation of almost €32 million funding to 110 projects under the Brexit Adjustment Scheme. Local Authority Marine Infrastructure Scheme 2023 included 4.8 million projects under the Cork County Council remit. 14 of the 15 applications, as the Deputy has already said, were approved as part of that 4.8 million. I understand that the Council had made an application for funding for certain works at Keelbeg Union, or Keelbeg Union Hall, which was not approved at the time. It was not clear from the application presented that the works, which appeared to be fundamentally security control measures, met with the central objectives of the scheme regarding economic diversification opportunities. So if the Council wishes to revisit this, it may do so, as not all of the funding for the scheme has been allocated at this time, and there will be further calls on projects. I would very much like to see each of the 110 projects approved this far under the scheme deliver quickly, so that the construction stimulus that the Seafood Sector Task Force identified can be felt on the ground as quickly as possible. That said, I appreciate there is a need for constructive engagement with harbour users where potential change and disruption is concerned. I must stress that the administration and funding of the scheme by the Department does not and cannot get involved in the operational matters of a local authority, and this includes the scope, design and prioritisation of projects. Safety in all marine users is of paramount importance, and I'm conscious of the improvements in safety can affect the existing use of the layout of public facilities, and I am advised that this has been reported that the Council has safety concerns concerning the old pier at Keelbeg and plans to restrict access, which the Deputy has referred to.
Thank you, Minister. And actually, the first 30 seconds of the last minute of your contribution were very encouraging, in that the tenure of this scheme, the tenure of the funding, and the focus of the funding, you said, was for diversification of use of the pier. And what's more encouraging is that the reason that the application wasn't successful was because it was for security works, as you said. Therefore, that says to me that Cork County Council have to, if they do come back in, with something entirely different, and not just barriers and cutting off access, but actually repair works. And I know there will be future calls for further funding in June and later on in the year as well. So that's very encouraging. But I just want to point out a trend here. And a trend, I'm not sure is it all local authorities, but certainly with Cork County Council, there is a trend of limiting access to piers and harbours. We spoke about Keelbeg and Union Hall, where they proposed to put up a barrier. Just across the water, just over a kilometre away in Glandore, there's similar plans. Not a barrier, but very much restricting use and access to this wonderful facility in Glandore. Glandore is a facility where they have a sailing school, where they have the yacht club, rowing club, kayakers, all various forms of use, But again, Cork County Council are coming in with this very much risk-averse approach, rather than doing what I believe they should be doing, opening up access to piers and harbours, encouraging people to come down, use the water, access the water, but put facilities in place where they can do that. But there is a worrying trend in the opposite direction, where they're actually cutting off access. And finally, just in relation to the Brexit Adjustment Local Authority funding, I think there has to be flexibility in terms of the scope there. The scope is that it's for shovel-ready projects. There's a lot of projects in Cork, in the county, on the coast of Cork, that may require foreshore, such as Garnish, Bear Island, where they may have require a foreshore licence. They should be considered, at least for the application for the foreshore, and the remit should not be as tight as it is. Thank you.
And I want to thank the Deputy for that further information, and I do hope that the Council will take the opportunity to engage with local stakeholders in an appropriate way regarding proposed works or changes to the use of marine public infrastructure. But back to the actual scheme, and we spoke about the Seafood Task Force. This is under the Brexit Adjustment Scheme, and it's a special once-off emergency instrument, and the purpose of this scheme is to provide support to counter the adverse economic, social, territorial and, where appropriate, environmental consequences of withdrawal of the UK from the European Union. And Ireland is the biggest beneficiary of this Brexit Adjustment Fund, and the scheme, the long-worded scheme, the Bellamy scheme, is designed to support job creation and protection by distributing these funds to enhance, upgrade, modernise and develop Ireland's publicly owned coastal and marine infrastructure, and thereby support downstream opportunities. As we did mention already, 14 projects have been already approved. There is funding still available. I think the Cork County Council are going to have to engage with the local communities as well as with the department in any new application. And I detect from reading this note, it must be recreational issues, which you've mentioned, all the various clubs that have been involved in the activities, marine sports, sailing, whale watching, all of those are important, but it must be linked to the Brexit issue. This is the point. It's funded from the Brexit Fund, and you did mention Glandore Pier, and again, I've been watching social media in the last day or two myself, and I've seen the protests on those matters. So it is important that the Council consult with the local community, have a Brexit impact aspect to the application, and go back to the department, because there is still funding available.
Ag bogar Ryan Ishkuji on Kate San Kestella in Annam Oireachtas Holly Cairns, the need to discuss traffic calming and safety infrastructure in Drimoleague, Cork, research by local campaigners has established the pronounced risk to safety of residents, especially school children and people with disabilities that need immediate intervention. Oireachtas, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Las Ciancórla. Minister, Drimoleague is a vibrant village in West Cork with a very active community. However, the speed and the scale of traffic going through the village is a major safety concern. Its location is on one of the main roads in West Cork, which means it has considerable through traffic. In particular, residents are concerned about the safety of children, older residents and people with disabilities, as well as the overall quality of life. Unfortunately, this issue is found in villages across Cork Southwest, from Belgooly to Calekill. It's one that I've raised with the Minister for Transport before. There is a pressing need for measures to change driver behaviour in towns and villages. I'm raising Drimoleague specifically because local campaigners are highlighting the need for immediate interventions to prevent injury or fatality. They're taking a proactive approach with the development of well-researched plans for improving the safety and the appearance of the area. Their report has identified issues around speeding, poor footpath quality, lack of accessibility, and inadequate road conditions. A survey of 50 households in and around the village revealed the scale of issues involved. Almost 3/4 of people were aware of incidents involving vulnerable people that resulted in injury or potential injury as a result of speeding, traffic or poor conditions on the roads and footpaths. Based on this work and through discussion, they're proposing traffic calming measures were proposed in line with the Department of Transport's traffic management guidelines to prevent injuries or worse. The plan includes additional zebra crossings, especially for school children, an enforced 30-kilometre speed limit, a roundabout at a dangerous junction, and a complete overhaul of the road markings, which are essentially non-existent in most of the village. It's a very strong and clear proposal highlighting the immediate needs and the passion of the community. And it's a pity Mr. Eamon Ryan isn't here today, as I'd like to have given him a copy of it. Although it shouldn't be necessary, there's a strong desire in the community to work with the Council and the Department to resolve these issues. The group has also put a strong emphasis on accessibility. Their survey identified a portion of the local population with a disability or access needs, including older people, wheelchair users and people with visual impairments. Poor quality footpaths and road services impact on their capacity to leave the house, to socialise and to participate in the community. Better quality infrastructure will help improve active transport measures. For example, the school is on one side of the village, but most of the newer housing is on the other side of the village. So students want to be able to walk to school, but they need safe infrastructure to be able to do that. Last year, as part of a consultation I did with primary schools in my area for the County Development Plan, the main priority identified by the young people was the capacity to travel safely to school themselves, either walking or cycling. More broadly, these safety concerns and poor infrastructure are impacting on the quality of life in the village. When it affects children being allowed out or older people with reduced mobility going to the post office, it starts to threaten the economic viability of local services, the pharmacy and the shops. Minister, this is a situation where a clear need has been identified by a local community and they have developed the required solutions. They have a plan and a passion to improve Drimoleague. They are also eager to work with the Council and the Department to implement this plan. Minister, what assurances can you give the people of Drimoleague that the Department of Transport will work with them and the Council on these issues, and what will the Department do to ensure that they are fulfilling their obligations going forward, leaving it up to communities to have to go above and beyond to get the absolute bare minimum has to stop?
Thank you, and I would like to thank Deputy Kearns for the opportunity to address this matter in the House today, and I'm speaking on behalf of Minister Eamon Ryan and also on behalf of Minister of State Naughton directly in the Department here this morning. So it's important to note that the Government is funding active travel at an unprecedented scale, and the Government has allocated 360 million per annum to support infrastructure that makes walking and cycling safer and more attractive for journeys to work, to school and for all types of journeys all over the country. Most of this work will be led as a byproduct to the calming of motorised traffic. Narrowing roads, installing cycle tracks, whether fully or partially segregated, contraflow cycling routes, one-way systems for vehicular traffic, all of these can play a part in slowing down traffic and thus making it safer for those walking, wheeling and cycling in our cities, towns and our villages. As part of that funding, we are also specifically supporting safe routes to schools, which was open to all schools to apply for funding. Unfortunately, it seems that no application was made by the school in Drimoleague for this funding support. So there is a special scheme for schools in relation to safe routes to schools, and it appears an application has not been submitted to the Department from the school as part of that scheme. Funding generally is not the issue that it was in previous years, given the level of funding that we now make available. Funding through the National Transport Authority of over 20 million was allocated to Cork County Council earlier this year. This shows the commitment of the Government to supporting active travel in County Cork. I understand from the National Transport Authority that an application was made by Cork County Council to support works in Drimoleague, but given the sheer amount of applications for funding made by Cork County Council, it was determined that the work would be progressed in the future rather than in the first phase of projects this calendar year. So there's an exceptionally high number of applications from Cork that need to be assessed with a view to having a clear line of projects in place for the coming year. I further understand that a number of projects have completed in Drimoleague over recent time through funding various schemes, including the CLAR funding and the National Transport Authority. Of course, active travel funding is not the only funding available to address the issues identified in Drimoleague. There is also the Safety Improvement Scheme. It must be remembered that the improvement and maintenance of regional and local roads is the statutory responsibility of each local authority in accordance with provisions of the Road Acts 1993. Works on these roads are funded from local authorities' own resources, supplemented by state road grants. The initial selection and prioritisation of works to be funded is also a matter for the local authority. and local authorities can apply under the Department Regional and Local Road Grant Programme for funding for safety works. Application for funding at lower cost improvement works under the Department's Safety Improvement Scheme are invited in order of priority on an annual basis for consideration for funding in the subsequent year. In submitting projects for consideration, local authorities are required to set out the collision history of the work site and outline how the proposed project would reduce accidents and address a hazard. Individual projects costing in excess of €200,000 are outside the scope of the scheme and fall to be considered under the Specific Improvement Grant Scheme. So to date, I understand no application has been made under the Safety Improvement Grant Scheme from Cork County Council for works in Drimoleague under this particular scheme. So essentially, I suppose the situation is I've announced about 4 or 5 different streams of funding that are available across the different departments, maybe 5 or 6 actually, I'm not quite sure. And some of those headings, applications haven't been submitted to date. And I think there is an opportunity for, especially from the school side, to make an application with the local authority, which hasn't been received in the department at this stage. Thank you.
Thanks for your reply, Minister. And I'm raising this matter today because of the urgency involved. Like I said, dedicated locals in Drimoleague have highlighted the issues. Now the Council and the Department of Transport need to act to prevent injury or fatality and to improve the quality of life in the village. And thank you for recommending the Safety Improvement Scheme. I know Cork County Council has applied for other funding streams, but we'll also ask the school to put one in relation to that. But the larger problem is the manner in which important safety issues like this are resolved. So communities are directed towards particular schemes all the time, rather than being assured of very basic infrastructure. Good quality footpaths and roads should be the minimum communities can expect. Residents and businesses pay their taxes and their property taxes specifically for these services. Too often communities essentially need to compete for funding, apply through all these different schemes, like you said, you just mentioned 6 there yourself, and when it's awarded then every TD and Senator tries to claim the credit for doing it. I raised a similar issue recently regarding Calekill last year with speeding through the village. No road markings whatsoever, no crossings for school children, and it was only thanks to a particular scheme that those problems will now be addressed. It's actually just not a sustainable way to ensure road safety and equal opportunity for all the villages, to rely on communities to be lobbying for these schemes. It's just, these are the bare minimum basic safety measures. The role of the Department of Transport is key here as a body that sets out standards, and there must also be more effective enforcement processes. But ultimately, people pay their property tax. They expect the very basic bare minimum. And the funding that you referenced that Drimoleague already got, that's like for a tiny extension of a footpath. Like, that's not something that we should be, you know, having a fanfare about. Like, they deserve so much more than that, all communities do.
And I do want to thank the Deputy for her contribution to the discussion today. And safety is at the heart of what we're seeking to achieve with our investment in transport. It behoves all of road users to concentrate and to consider all other road users to slow down and be observant. And in the wider context of road safety, this is set out in the government's 5th road safety strategy, with the Road Safety Authority has overall responsibility for implementing this. So on the 15th of December 2021, the Government and the Road Safety Authority launched Ireland's Road Safety Strategy for 21 to 2030, along with the associated action plan for the first phase running from 21 to 2024. And the programme of government is committed to introducing an ambitious road safety strategy targeting the vision of the Vision Zero principle, and we will introduce road safety strategy focused on reducing death and injuries and vulnerable road users, pedestrians and cyclists. But I think the Deputy and the conversation here this morning is instructive. I think most counties have found now that there's such a variety of schemes out there that it's a full-time job for maybe a number of people in local authorities. And we're just talking about roads here today, with about 6 different schemes, and the same can happen for housing, the same can happen for playgrounds, and there's such a variety of schemes. And what's really, I often feel there needs to be maybe more joined up between the schemes, because you can apply for 4 different schemes, but there's another scheme a council didn't apply for. So really, I think I would ask the local authorities in general to make sure that there are people are aware of any time anything is going in under any particular aspect, that they are aware of the full range of schemes that could contribute to that, and to make applications under them all. Because, as I think we're all familiar, some schemes get good funding and some schemes are not applied for. So there is need, I think, due to the number of schemes for good coordination in application, in applying for funds under these schemes. Thank you.
Margaret, Anish an tríú san ceist in Anna Oireachtas Brendan Griffin to discuss increased funding for local improvement scheme roads nationwide.
Thanks very much, Glasgow Carla, and I'm very grateful for being selected to raise this matter this morning, and thank the Minister of State for being present here as well to take the topical issue. This is in relation to local improvement scheme roads around the country. We know that there are thousands of them all over Ireland that are awaiting funding. These are non-council roads and laneways that require improvement works, and certainly hundreds of them are in my own constituency in County Kerry, and the Minister of State would be very much familiar with hundreds more in the Laois Offaly constituency, and they're all over Ireland. And these are roads that communities can't improve themselves because of the cost of doing it, and of course the contribution from the state through the LIS via the local authority is very important in terms of meeting the contribution of those local residents to get these roads done. And the difference it makes when a road for the last kilometre or two up to your house is almost impassable and then becomes surfaced and up to a proper standard is enormous quality of life impact for the residents there. It's not just for people who are driving the road, it's for people who are cycling the road, people who are walking the road, people who are wheelchair users, people who are trying to push prams and buggies, and people in all sorts of different circumstances. And I think sometimes that's forgotten. We often just think about these roads in the context of motorised vehicles, and it's much more than that. And I welcome the progress that has happened in recent years, particularly since 2016, kick-started, I must say, by my colleague, Minister Michael Ring, when the existing list that was there was eaten into and serious progress was made in terms of clearing that list. But of course, local authorities have gone away and made a new call a couple of years ago, and now there's a huge list there again. And it simply needs more funding. Last year, there was 10.5 million from the state initially towards local improvement schemes all over the country, and that money was dealt out to the local authorities. My understanding is based on the area of the counties that were applying. And subsequently, that 10.5 million was increased by a further 10.5 million up to a total of 21 million as a result of some reprofiling of capital within the Department of Rural Affairs. So that funding then again was dished out to the local authorities based on the ask that was provided by those local authorities, and a certain percentage of that ask then was honoured. But again, it's only a drop in the ocean in terms of the amount of roads that are awaiting and the amount of roads that can be cleared by this funding. And this year, my understanding is the budget is 11 million, which is an increase on the 10.5 million that was originally allocated last year. But again, that 11 million will only go so far. I think my own county got somewhere just under €700,000, which is very welcome funding, very, very welcome. But it certainly only covers a very small percentage of the roads that are actually awaiting funding. So what I'm asking this morning is that we would go back and look to see can further capital funding in the Department of Rural Affairs be reprofiled and provided for the local improvement scheme roads. We know that these roads, when the funding is provided, the funding is used by the local authorities. Very often as well, these roads are leading to very important amenities in our communities like lakes and mountains and trails. And these roads are vital in terms of well-being and in terms of people being able to enjoy the outdoor amenities that are in communities. And it's not just simply going to people's homes. So I would ask that that would happen, and that certainly a further 11 million if possible, and a lot more would be found to try to do that. And could I just say as well, it's important that we used to also have the Oireachtas scheme in the Gaeltacht areas as well. And now, more than ever, the funding for local improvement schemes is important to try to address the deficiencies in roads that are non-council roads in those Gaeltacht areas also, Minister.
And I want to thank Deputy Griffin for raising this matter here this morning, and Minister Heather Humphreys has asked me to respond on her behalf. The Local Improvement Scheme is a programme for improvement works on small private non-public roads in rural areas which are not under the normal maintenance of local authorities. The scheme is funded by the Department of Rural Community Development and is administered through the local authorities. And I do want to acknowledge the major step up in funding when Minister Ring was in that department, and and a lot of funding was cleared, and a lot of the long application lists in many local authorities were substantially dealt with as a result of that additional funding over those few years. The focus of the scheme is to support the continued improvement of rural roads and laneways that are not normally maintained by local authorities, but which represent a vital piece of infrastructure for rural residents. The local improvement scheme was relaunched in its own right in 2017, and between 2017 and 21, the Department allocated 18 million to local authorities for improvement works on these roads. It is acknowledged how important the scheme is for people in rural areas and for farm families in particular. There is no other source of funding for these roads which provide vital services to agricultural lands and rural homes. The scheme is also used to fund non-public roads leading to important community amenities such as graveyards, beaches, piers, mountain access points and tourist heritage sites. The Department of Rural and Community Development provides an allocation of funding each year to the local authorities for works on these roads. The selection of roads to be funded under the scheme is a matter for each local authority based on the priority condition of the roads in the county. The local authority may rely on the existingness of eligible roads and or advertise for new applicant roads. And I said the practice varies from county to county on that. Some local authorities have been successful in clearing their backlog and they've opened it up for new applications to be considered for next year, whereas some local authorities have a big long list that are there maybe a decade in some cases and are working down through the list. So the actual situation in relation to applications is a matter for each individual local authority depending on its existing waiting list. Individual applicants contribute to the cost of the roads project. This can vary from 10 to 15%, as the Deputy knows, depending on how many beneficiaries are on a particular road. And this contribution is currently capped at €1,200. However, the majority of beneficiary contributions are well below this figure. And as part of our rural future, the Government has committed to increasing the level of investment in the repair of non-public roads through the local improvement scheme. Given the value of the scheme for people living in rural areas, Minister Humphreys was pleased to be in a position to increase the allocation this year. Funding for the scheme in 2021 increased by 5% to 10.5 million, and the Minister has secured a further funding of 0.5 million to bring the allocation to 11 million for 2022. I can also confirm to the Deputy that Minister Humphreys has recently written again to Minister Eamon Ryan TD to explore whether funding can be made available from the Department of Transport to support this scheme also. It is believed that a cross-government approach might reap dividends in dealing with the backlog of applications on hand, and Minister Humphreys, together with her officials, will continue to keep that option under review. And one point I do want to remember or highlight that I mentioned already, there is a contribution cap of 1,200, and most people who contribute are below that figure, and the amount of contribution is quite small. And we actually all know from our own experience, sometimes the contribution can be by way of works in kind by local community, as in, you know, clearing some of the ditches or the banks or doing some work like that. So it doesn't always have to be 100% cash, and the local authorities have methods of dealing with those things as well in terms of works in lieu of a cash contribution.
Gormagat Arastad agus mar dúirt mé bhí an scéim borráise ón ribh de counter Gaeltachta agus bhí sé sin an táchtach de muintear Gaeltachta chun na bóra sin a cumad ach inis tá na bóra sin ag dul an olc mar níl an airgad ann, níl golóir airgad ann faoi LIS. So tá sé níos táchtaí níos mó airgad a thuairt chun gach bóthar sna Gaeltachtaí agus taobh ma na Gaeltachtaí a cumad agus a ausú. Minister, I want to particularly take up a point there in the final paragraph of your response in relation to the cross-government approach, and this is something I suggested previously, and I'm glad that Minister Humphreys has progressed this. There is an obligation, in my view, certainly for the Department of Transport to chip in here. It's a huge department with a massive capital budget, and there is massive scope for them there to make a contribution here that is a very small contribution in the context of the overall budget of the Department of Transport, but could make a huge difference for the local improvement scheme. And this is a transport issue, ultimately. This is about people getting from A to B using whatever mode of transport that they can possibly use. And yes, we have, in my view, the Department of Transport abdicating its responsibility here to contribute to these roads. These are roads that may be non-council roads, but they're used by everybody. And I think it is a cop-out for the Department of Transport not to be contributing here. And I'm calling here again this morning for the Department of Transport to step up to the plate and contribute to this fund, because it makes a difference to everybody. And they can't simply just give it to Rural Affairs and say that it's not our business. I don't believe that that is in any way the approach for the Department of Transport to take on this issue. Can I finally, in the few seconds I've left, call clearly for an increased budget, extra capital from the Department of Rural Affairs, but for Transport to come in and give extra capital as well to try to finally clear the list. Thank you.
And Deputy, I concur with the point you've made, and as you've said, Minister Humphreys has been in direct contact with Minister Ryan in relation to the Department of Transport coming on board on this scheme, and you specifically mentioned the Gaeltacht specific scheme, and I know your views will be taken fully into account by the Minister. Doesn't affect me in County Leash, so I'm not personally familiar with that scheme, but I presume it's along similar lines in the Gaeltacht areas. And as we have said, what contributed to the backlog for a number of years, there was no specific fund for this, but in 2017 allocations were made and 80 million has been given for 3,000 roads being improved to benefit 13,000 rural landowners and residents since that period. And what I will also say is that the issue of reprofiling unused capital funding is a very good suggestion from both departments, and I also know, and you will be, all of us will be aware in rural areas, the value of this for people going to lakes or mountains or to the bogs or into forests, even though they might not be particularly living on the particular area. And it's important that funding be increased. And what follows on from this debate eventually in due course, and we all have it, is when the council have done work on the road over maybe once and maybe 10 years, have come back again, eventually people think it's a public road and it's not yet taken in charge by the local authority, and the local authorities are slow to take in charge some of the roads in these areas, having completed the work. So I think ultimately that's an issue that will have to be addressed by the local authorities, and I will convey your views directly to both ministers today. Thank you.
Nis an san Keshtiaranok in Anam Chapter Edon or Reardon to discuss a multi-denominational co-educational second level school. Details of that.
Good morning, Lord Concordia and Minister. I very much appreciate your attendance here. It shows your commitment to the debate, and I very much appreciate it. I just want to make reference to the school development area in my own constituency, which is known as Clester, Raheny, Clontarf. So if you're familiar with North Dublin, Minister, the borders will be the Malahide Road, the Coast and the Oscar Traynor and Kilbarrack Road. And within that area there's about 7 second level schools, all of which have religious ethos, 4 of which are all girls schools, 1 of which is an all boys school, and 2 of them that are mixed. One has a Church of Ireland ethos and the other has a Catholic ethos. I suppose what parents are saying in my constituency, Minister, is that there isn't a school for them if they are attending, their children are attending an Educate Together school, for example, or if they want to choose a non-denominational or multi-denominational school for their children, they don't have one. Now, not only that, but just on the border, if you like, on the Malahide Road, there are 2 other schools, 2 other second-level schools in Oireachtas and Chanel Coolock. They are also all-boys schools. Now, you will know from your own department, Minister, the department has not given sanction to any new single-gender schools since 1998. It's not department policy. And what the department are saying to the campaign group is that it's up for the campaign group, if you like, to engage with each of these schools to see if they are willing, able, or at a point in their development of changing their ethos. Now, that is unlikely to happen. That is putting the onus back on volunteers to engage with schools who have enough on their plate, if you like, without having such a huge conversation in the short term. To be honest, having had this conversation before, Minister, with your predecessor about another part of my constituency, while the initial response from the department was that demographics didn't justify a new school, that's where we ended up, and that's why there is a second level Educate Together school now in the Northern Fringe area as sanctioned by the department. So what I'm asking you, Minister, is for the departments to sanction and to recognise a new second level Educate Together school in this area. This area has changed, its demographics have changed, there's a huge number of new young families in the area. My office has never had the number of requests in terms of school places at second level, which has had in the last number of months. It is now a huge issue locally for families trying to access second level places. So, in terms of the area, 7 schools that are listed, and many of whom are difficult to get into in the first instance. One of them has a wider remit, a wider mandate, if you like, in that it is of a Church of Ireland ethos. Therefore, it accepts children from right across the north side. So, living within the catchment area doesn't give you, if you like, access to that school as of geographical right. It has a wider remit. So you really are reduced to 6 schools. As I say, 4 of those will be all girls. One of them will be all boys. So the point, Minister, is in terms of allowing for that continuum of education in an ethos which is multi-denominational, parents in the area are extremely anxious that we can move to a situation where that choice is available to them, and that they will not be forced, if you like, to send their children to a second level school which is under an ethos which they are not comfortable with. Even though all these schools will say, and they will rightfully say, that they do everything they possibly can to facilitate children of all backgrounds, I think what is best for the parents that I'm talking to is to have a new school, a new multi-denominational ethos school that will afford them the choice to have that continuum of education in the manner in which they best fits their own belief system.
We've just 5 minutes left now in total.
Good morning, and thank you, Deputy, and I appreciate you raising the matter. It does give me the opportunity to set out for the House the position with regard to second level schools in, as you've said, Colester, Raheny and Clontarf. In order to plan for school provision and analyse the relevant demographic data, the Department of Education, as you'd be aware, Deputy, divides the country into 314 school planning areas and uses a geographical information system using data from a range of sources, including child benefit school enrolment data, to identify where the pressure for school places across the country will arise and where additional school accommodation is needed at primary and post-primary level. Where the data indicates clearly that additional provision is required at post-primary level, the delivery of such additional provision is dependent on the particular circumstances of each case and may be provided through either one or a combination of the following options: utilising existing unused capacity within a school or schools, extending the capacity of a school or schools, or provision of a new school or schools in the area in question. A patronage process is run after it has been decided, based on demographic analysis, that a new school is required. This patronage process is open to all patron bodies and prospective patrons. The online patronage process system has been developed by the Department of Education to provide objective information to parents, which will allow them to make an informed choice about their preferred model of patronage, as well as language of instruction, whether Irish or English, of a new school. Parental preferences, as well as other considerations such as the extent of diversity of provision in an area, including Irish medium provision, are key to the decision-making process and to whether, at post-primary level, a school would take the form of an Irish medium, Gael Coláiste, or whether of English medium, the school would include an Irish medium unit or an ANUD. Most new post-primary schools must have a student enrolment capacity of between 600 and 1,000 students. A lower threshold of 400 students may apply to Gael Coláiste, having regard to the alternative of establishing an ANUD within a school. There are, as you have said, Deputy, 7 post-primary schools currently serving the Colester, Raheny, Clontarf school planning area. The Department's most recent projections do not indicate significant increases in school place requirements at post-primary level in this SPA, to the extent that an entirely new school would be required in the shorter term. Nevertheless, and I want to be clear in saying this, Deputy, the Department will continue to work to ensure that there is sufficient capacity in the area to meet school place demand, and will keep all the requirements in this area of Killester, Raheny, Clontarf, as with all other school planning areas, under significant review as we do on an ongoing basis. Additionally, the Department will continue to liaise with Dublin City Council in respect of its review of the Dublin City Development Plan, with a view to identifying any potential long-term school accommodation requirements.
Thanks, Minister, and I appreciate your reply. But again, every area is different. You say that there is 7 post-primary schools serving the Killester, Raheny, Clontarf area, but as I've said to you, 4 of those are all girls' schools. One of them is of a Church of Ireland ethos, has a remit wider than than that immediate area for the entirety of North Dublin, and so you know, it is a particular situation. I am encouraged by what you're suggesting here in terms of ongoing review. I think what I will do with the campaign group is to get as much data and as much information possibly to engage with the department, because, as I said to you previously, I had a discussion in the channel at the time with your predecessor about the necessity for a multi-denominational school around the Northern Fringe. At that time I got a very similar answer to this, which was quite negative. However, the school is now up and running, and I expect the same thing to happen here. Minister, I would suggest to you again, if you consider the changing demographic of the area, the younger families that have come into it, and the fact that if you are not interested in a Catholic second level education, you have no option. You have no option. 7 schools are listed, 6 of them are Catholic, 1 of them is non-Catholic but has a wider remit across the entirety of North Dublin, and so therefore you are not entitled to enrolment in that school, if you like, because of your if you live in that immediate catchment area. So, Minister, I'll say to you, I will continue to raise this with you. The campaign group with myself will be compiling data to engage with the department. But this is a growing area. It's with younger families who are going to need second level places. But it's unfair, Minister, to allow children to attend a multi-denominational primary school, and there is a new one, not a new one, but a relatively new one that is moving into Killester in September. There are a number of Educate Together schools that have opened up primary schools in that area in the last number of years. But then at 6th class, to inform those children that they have no opportunity to continue that multi-denominational education until leaving cert, because they just have to, if you like, move into a denominational situation. And I think that is unfair to those children and those families.
Minister, just to conclude as briefly as possible, if you could.
Thank you, Deputy. And just, I suppose, to clarify, and I appreciate we're running out of time, that the demographics at post-primary level in the Raheny, Clontarf, Killester school planning area are expected to peak in 2028, with a gradual decline out to 2040. So the 2020 enrolment is 3,789 across 7 schools, expected to peak in enrolment at 4,087 in 2028. I suppose it's also important to note that, as I said, where a patronage process is being run, for clarity, I would need to say again that the patronage process is run after it has been decided that a new school is warranted or required. The patronage process is open to all patron bodies and prospective patrons. Parental preferences for each patron and in relation to the language of instruction of the school from parents of children who reside in the relevant school planning area, together with the extent of diversity currently available in the area, are key to the decision-making process. An online patronage process system has been developed by the Department to provide objective information to all parents, which allows them to make an informed choice about their preferred model of patronage for their child's education. The patronage process for new schools is overseen by an external independent advisory group, the New Schools Establishment Group. And I appreciate, Deputy, the points that you have made in terms of those that you are working with. I am, as I have said in my earlier response, happy to keep this under review. We do that constantly and across all of our school planning areas, and we work with the information as it comes on stream, either through the local authorities, the development plans, or whatever the case might be. And we are very proactive in this space. So I am happy, as I said, to confirm again that we keep everything under review. Gur Magat.